off the list, or how do you go about it? Do you wind up in the 2016 Olympics from something that you a vision you held on to, or was it just a brick a day and you see where you go, or how do you go about your journey?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was in my mind. You have to start in your mind. Start
Okay.
with the thought process. Start with what are you thinking about? How are you going about thinking that? And making sure it comes to fruition. So I was at the track every day before not every day, but every training session before the Olympic Games saying, I am an Olympian. I am an Olympian. I got this. So what does an Olympian look like? What does an Olympian do? How do they approach practice? How do they wake up? What do they do in the morning? What do they do at night? So I just had to live in the attitude of I'm already there.
Okay, but I think you did more than just I'm already there, because I think what you described now, you actually molded out who an Olympian is. You actually became the Olympian, the character. Um, and that's I mean, Atomic Habits. This book talks a lot about not necessarily being so focused on the goal, but being focused on what type of person would do these type of things, and that's actually what you describe. I always describe black genius. I think we have a form of, like, I almost call it accidental genius, because I believe, like, generally speaking, black people were spirit driven, right? So a lot of times our genius comes from the inside versus, like, the white man more so is, I think he's a very more analytical. So a lot of his genius comes from trial and error. So a lot of times our genius, we don't even know necessarily, like, you have probably, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Atomic Habits, but I mean there's whole books written on the methodology that you practice.
Yes.
And this sounds like something that you just were led to off of spirit. And I think that's what's so unique about our genius. But I do think at the same time, and one of the things I take responsibility for is reminding people of their genius, because that's more than just you just having a feeling. Like, that's the actual genius what you're speaking of. Let me ask you this: what's a common mistake that you think in today's world everyone has a goal or wants to be tenacious or wants to get it done, or what do you think is a mistake that you see in modern goal setting and achievement, strategizing?
Um, I would say having the discipline and the discernment to know that the Holy Spirit dwells in us all.
Okay.
And to know that we have to walk in that knowing.
Okay.
So knowing that, it's just like I tell the kids, if you're gonna do something, go 100%. Don't give me a rep at 50% and you telling me you got this goal.
Okay.
So give me the rep at 100. I'd rather you give me the rep at 100% and rest, and then give me the rep, than give me a rep like that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So just going 100%, knowing that the Holy Spirit resides in you and walking in that faith.
And I hear that you keep reiterating the spiritual element of it, which a lot of times we don't necessarily incorporate in the actual day-to-day discipline of in the pursuit of something. And Brother Virgil, he's actually an ordained minister, one of my good friends, and he always has an on-time word. But I like most definitely, but just the incorporation of the spirit and just listening to that, does that come off as like trust per se? Is that just like, hey, I'm here, I'm walking in the spirit, and you use that to alleviate maybe anxiety or worry, or like when you just lock into that spiritual element of it, like how does that kind of show up in your practice or your discipline?
Well, I keep bringing it up because you keep bringing it up.
Okay.
And it is what it is. The Holy Spirit within us. So you have to bring it up. And it's not only it's not a combination of bringing it into us. It's already in us.
Okay.
So it's not something that you just have to acknowledge it.
Okay.
And that's how you become one with the Spirit, instead of just like, oh, the Spirit's over there, I'm over here. Nah, we one.
Wow, you got a great foundation. I mean, you have a great philosophy, which, I mean, behind success, almost always is that. I like the way, just learning more about your journey, your excellence from track and field. It wasn't limited to just that. It was, you also were a high level scholar, and who performed, didn't you have almost a perfect GPA coming out of high school? Mm-hmm. So, like, you fully utilized athletics, took the discipline, brought it to the classroom, and ultimately was able to really strengthen your relationship with the Lord, travel, see the world. I think in our community, I don't know that we have a healthy relationship with athletics today, because it seems like we lean on the athletic side, but I don't see the emphasis on the scholarship side. Was it your mother who brought that balance in, or how did you like allow yourself to not be just a track star, but be a track star, a scholar, a woman of God, and continue cultivating those other areas?
Yeah, my mom always said, you go to school to learn and you go back home. You don't go to school to play or to do all that. You go to school to get the information and you go back home. So that's what I kept my mom. I'm going to school, I'm going to get the information, I'm going to do what I need to do and go back home. And you can't be an athlete without being a scholar. Some of the greatest athletes are scholars because they understand that you have to learn your sport. You have to learn your craft. Mm-hmm. It's not somebody that's just going to keep teaching you. If you don't learn something, then how I'm going to teach you something that we can't bring together.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
You talk a lot about your mom, and I salute that. I mean, she's a wonderful person to produce someone such as yourself on that level.
Yes.
And I appreciate the disciplines that you incorporated in your development and process to success. But can I ask you about your relationship with your dad? I haven't heard much at all about his influence on you, and what kind of relationship did you have with him? Because I focus more on Young Fathers of America. We have a LLC that's focusing on young men who are young teenage fathers. We know a young man that's 15 with 6 kids, 6 different girls. And so the fatherhood component is missing in our community. So I'm just curious about what was your relationship with him?
Well, my father wasn't always around. See him every blue moon. But he was incarcerated a lot. He had his own journey, his own story.
Okay.
But I learned a lot from my father, a lot about discernment, a lot about God from my father. Even when we had times to talk, that's all he spoke into me. So, yeah, so I give a lot of that glory to my father as well.
But even though there was a relationship that wasn't consistent, he was able to give you a foundation, because I think everything that you described in your process to greatness, the foundation, fundamental part of it is your foundation and relationship with God.
Yes.
And it's amazing to me that with such a small amount of time in the relationship, not a whole lot of quality time, not a whole lot of time spent together, the influence and impact of what he gave you was significant throughout your experience.
Definitely.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I salute you.
Thank
Awesome.
Yeah, wonderful spirit, and just great, great, humility, and
Yes.
everything to that nature. And now I want to, continue the dialoguing with you. One thing I wanted to ask you before you, how do you handle failure, or how do you handle it? I don't even know if that's the correct term, to even call it, but like, how do you handle when you don't hit your mark, and you have to kind of recalibrate?